So today we're going to be learning about the production possibilities curve,
which is also known as the PPC,
in addition to comparative and absolute advantage. This is my assistant Kayley, and she'll be helping me out today. So let's begin. We're going to start with the PPC in the definition.
The definition of the PPC is all of the possible combination of two goods that can be produced at one time using all resources.
Next, we're going to go into the two different types of graphs. Right here, you have the straight line graph, and then you have the curved graph. The straight line means that there's constant opportunity cost because the goods are similar. However, the curved line means that there's an increasing opportunity cost because the goods are different.
Next, we will be talking about the different points on the curve. Point A, which is below the curve, represents inefficient production. Point B, which is on the curve, means perfect production. And when you see a point above the curve, that means it's overproducing.
Now that we've got the meaning of the points, let's talk about what shifts them and the curve. What shifts the points are the actual production of goods. But what shifts the curve is resources and technology in addition to the potential to produce. To make sure that you understand, we're going to show you a few examples. This is the first example. Now you see that the PPC is curved because computers and stools, they're not the same goods. And you see that the whole curve shifts because the potential to produce is changed, considering there's an increase in technology.
Now that you just seen an example of shifting of the curve, now we're going to show you how to shift a point on the curve. Since many workers are unemployed, the point is going to shift below the curve because it is less efficient to produce.
Now that concludes the PPC. Now we're going to move into absolute and comparative advantage. Absolute advantage is who is the best at producing something.
And comparative advantage is who gives up the least.
Or whose opportunity cost is the same. Now let's look at how to find the absolute and comparative advantage. The absolute advantage is pretty simple. You see in this table, Nick has the absolute advantage. Why? Because he's the best at producing boots. He produced more. So whenever you're trying to find the absolute advantage, just look at who produced more. Nick also has the absolute advantage in sandals because he produced 15, while Noelle, she only produced 8. However, comparative advantage is a little bit different.
To find the comparative advantage, you'll use what Brittni just showed you, which is also the absolute advantage. For Nick, he produces 5 boots for every 15 sandals. So you'll divide 5 on both sides, which will get you 1 boot equals 3 sandals. And then you'll find the reciprocal, which would be 1/3 boot for every 1 sandal. Now you'll move on to Noelle. She produces 4 boots for every 8 sandals. You'll divide 4 on both sides, which will get you 1 boot, which will equal 2 sandals. And then find the reciprocal, which is 1.5 boot, which will equal 1 sandal. Noelle has the comparative advantage and boots because she produced 1 boot for every 2 sandals, unlike Nick, who produces 1 boot for every 3 sandals. Nick has the comparative advantage in sandals because he has 1 sandal equals 1/3 boot, unlike Noelle, who produces 1.5 boot for 1 sandal.
Now we're going to go into examples to make sure that you understand. We're going to use 2 random names,
Don and Dan,
to find the comparative and absolute advantage
We're going to use radios and speakers
as examples. Now, let's say that Dan, he produced 6 radios and 2 speakers, while Dawn, she produced 10 radios and 5 speakers. Now let's look. Since Dawn produced 10 radios, we'd say that she has the absolute advantage. And since she also produced 5 speakers to Dan's 2 speakers, we'd also say that she has the absolute advantage in speakers as well. Now, let's go and try to find the comparative advantage.
Now we're going to do the comparative advantage. Dan produces 6 radios for every 2 speakers. So to find the comparative advantage, you need to divide both sides by 2. We'll give you 1 speaker for 3 radios. And then you'll find the reciprocal by flipping and having 1 radio equal 1/3 speakers. But first, you got to find out about Don. Since he produced 10 radios for every 5 speakers, you'll divide both sides by 5 and get 2 radios equals 1 speaker. And then find the reciprocal, which is 1 radio equal 1/2 speaker. Dan has the comparative advantage of 1 radio equals 1/3 speaker because Dawn has 1 radio equals 1/2 speaker. But Dawn has the comparative advantage in speakers because he produces 1 speaker for every 2 radios, unlike Dan, who produces 3 radios for every 1 speaker. Now we're going to move on to terms of trade. Terms of trade is basically using comparative advantage and absolute advantage to see which one benefits both Dan and Dawn.
We're going to continue to use the same example and the same numbers that we previously showed you. Now, as you can see, we haven't changed any of the math. All we have to do is find the numbers in between to see which one benefits both. As you see boxed around, it says that 1 speaker equals 2.5 radios. Why is that? Because for Dan, 1 speaker equals 3 radios, and for Dawn, 1 speaker equals 2 radios. Now, how can we find something to benefit both of them? All we have to do is find a number in the middle. Because if there's 2.5 radios, that means that Dawn is getting back more since she has the comparative advantage. She's getting back more from Dan than she would if she produced on her own. And Dan, he's having to produce less, which is 2.5 radios, than he would if he was producing on his own. So it makes sense for 1 speaker to equal 2.5 radios.